Welcome to the Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire podcast. This podcast is presented by DMV Wrestling at dmvprowrestling.com. Hi, this is Jeff Quentin, and welcome to episode 3 of Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire. Today's guest is the self-proclaimed president of wrestling, Phil Stamper. We'll find out more about Phil and his career in pro wrestling, both in the ring and behind the scenes, and how he got the nickname President of Wrestling in this episode. Thanks for joining us. Start things off, since some of you may not know where that name comes from, we're going to ask Phil to introduce himself briefly and to tell us what his different authority roles are in the different wrestling companies.
So I've been involved in the world of professional wrestling for a very long time now. And the president of wrestling sort of came about because I was really doing a lot of work, not just in front of the camera, but also behind the scenes. And really, in many ways, it was like, I really am running wrestling right now, because I was working with so many different companies. And that sort of has now progressed to being both in front of camera, helping with things behind the scenes, and now actually helping to run things as an authority figure in front of the camera and behind the scenes as well. And so at MCW Pro Wrestling in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Delaware, I'm our general manager. At IWA East Coast in West Virginia, I'm the commissioner there. At Honorary Wrestling Federation up in Pennsylvania, I'm co-owner. At High Tension Wrestling, I'm their general manager up in Pennsylvania. At Wrestling Revolver, I am the executive vice president. So sort of here and there, because I have that association of being the president of wrestling, that I am brought into sometimes these places now to be that authority figure, or that sensible voice of reason.
How did you get into wrestling to start?
I mean, of course, I was a fan as a kid, and so went and knew. I was that kid that wrote to like WCW and WWE and was like, "Why can't kids wrestle?" And learned really early on, there's things like you have to go to training. So I knew in middle school, okay, training has to be a thing. And when I graduated high school, I was at this crossroad. There really wasn't wrestling anywhere near me, and it was like, well, okay, I want to go to college. And, because what happens if I go down the path of wrestling and like something bad happens, I get injured, I have to have something to fall back on. So to go to college, I had to pay for it 100% myself. So I knew I couldn't afford both options. And so I went to college, but I started to work behind the scenes for a couple of different companies. And then eventually when I think I was a junior in college, a friend got hooked up with a new school that had opened up in Baltimore. And at that point, I was looking for training. I was like, I think I can balance doing both, and started going to a place called the Dominion in Baltimore, ran by a guy named Otto Stark, and started my training there. Didn't know enough to know that, well, maybe he doesn't know a lot. And so, though I got trained there initially, I went on and took a lot more seminars and never really stopped learning at that point. And so had a time of my career significantly inside of the ring and less behind the scenes. And now that has kind of been turning back a little bit, and I'm doing more behind the scenes, and as an authority figure. And some of that happened because more recently I had a significant neck surgery now about 4 or 5 years ago. And so kind of kept to the authority figure or mouthpiece role. And that has also changed a little bit because now time has passed. I've healed. I've gotten better. So I've also been back in the ring again. So it just depends on the place and what happens. But initially just getting in, it was, okay, I want to see if this business is the place I want to be. And then go on to get trained. I knew I had to get trained. So went on and did that.
What were your early influences as far as wrestlers go?
So being a kid, I'd come home and ESPN Classic would have like old episodes of World Class Championship Wrestling and Global Wrestling Federation. Of course, was watching the WWE and WCW at the time. And, so I was the kid who was a fan of like Hulk Hogan and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I was a kid who was a fan of when WCW became big. I focused on WCW more than I did WWE for a while. I was a big fan of Eric Embry and his feud that he had with Skandar Akbar at World Class Championship Wrestling, because it was such an involved story, and it wasn't even about a wrestler versus another wrestler. Here is Skandar Akbar, this evil manager of this entire stable of people, but the stable of people almost didn't matter because really the feud was between Eric and Skandar. And that was so intriguing for me and enticing for me. And I just got hooked on it. And as bad as maybe the where it went, like Sting versus the Black Scorpion. Yeah, I mean, because just the mystery around it, who is the Black Scorpion? And so like I kind of was attracted to more of, what's happening here. Like I'm intrigued by what's going on. But of course, always loved when I would watch like Jushin Thunder Liger. Always loved when I would watch Dean Malenko. So on the technical side of wrestling, like I was always just amazed. Like that was what really, really, the story got me in, but watching like amazing technical wrestling was really what latched me in.
Who have you enjoyed working with the most that you work with now?
Ooh, right now. Company-wise or person-wise, or how do you mean?
Originally meant personality-wise or person-wise, but you can say companies as well, but I don't want to get you in trouble with anybody.
That's fair. It's interesting, like I said, I when I got trained to wrestle, I was like, well, I'm going to keep learning, and went out and did seminars, and I still feel like now I keep learning things from different people because we all bring sort of a different experience from us. And as much as like Sami Callihan and I like really want to punch each other in the face, like he's amazing when it comes to like the visual aesthetic of things and does amazing graphic work and video work. And so like I see that sort of visual eye on things. And I love it. And then I have a Dan McDevitt that runs MCW. I see a sense of that organization and sort of the business acumen of how, things need to be processed. And I'm like, oh, this makes sense to me. And, it just keeps adding into that. And I'm even excited by new wrestlers, like wrestlers who are just sort of starting out, like I think of Junie Underwood. I think of Ricky Price. I think of Crash Jackson, and their energy kind of gets me excited and motivates me in many respects, because I'm seeing where they're going to go in their trajectory, and it's like, wow, like that's really exciting to see them so jazzed about where they're about to head, and it's like it makes me also want to work harder to also help benefit them as well as myself.
Do you have any memorable feuds that you remember at the independent wrestling level that you think are really, even right now, that you think are really hot feuds or really good feuds?
That I'm in, or just like generally watching right now?
Generally watching.
I mean, I guess I do have to be slightly self-serving a little bit. And, my rivalry I do have with Sami Callihan, and because I'm also at Revolver as the manager of the unit, and the unit is on both on the East Coast or in the Midwest, and we have pockets of association, and it's sort of this feud with Sami Callihan versus the unit right now. People are paying attention to that. People understand it. I'm trying to think larger on the independents. It's funny because, like, I shouldn't say funny because this person is terrifying. Charles Mason is a disturbing individual, but in all the right ways. And so like the feuds he's had with like Billy Starks and Love Doug, even, like, it was just so intense, just to like sort of sit back and like, oh wow, like, oh man. I mean, that just really like resonates in my brain. Oh man, I'm like, my brain's like scanning independent wrestling right now, like, who else is out there right now, who else is out there.
I saw Charles Mason at the Jersey J Cup recently, and yeah, he was pretty creepy.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. Like, it's so weird because because I'm in it sometimes, it's hard for me to like, okay, let me step back and like look at that perspective and like where are all these different feuds. And I think, Killian, how about this? Killian McMurphy and the Goon. So you're talking about like Killian McMurphy and A.K. Willis and Miles Millennium and Big Dust and Eel O'Neill and that crew and the Gooniverse. And it's like wherever they go, they bring trouble with them. And so it's sort of like the world of independent wrestling versus Killian McMurphy and the Goons. And I love it. Like it's interesting to watch, and it's like you are literally watching a universe be built in front of you with so many rivalries and so many heads, but that it eeps through different promotions. And that's where my brain kind of went for a minute, because I was thinking, well, there's not a lot of feuds that sort of go company to company to company. Killian's been able to do that in the world of wrestling and even coordinate with some promotions elements of the ongoing story of the Goons. And I'm like, this is amazing. The time and attention it takes. And even the feud that's ongoing right now with Mary and Big Dust, where they were going to get married and then it didn't happen. And it was a big joke by Big Dust that then causes Mary to go insane, or more insane, I guess is the case maybe. Is just amazing to watch and see all of that sort of transpire.
What is your most embarrassing moment in wrestling?
I was a couple years in, and I had like I hit this moment because when I first started wrestling, I was also sort of randomly very sick, and some people knew it, some people didn't know it. I'd been so sick, I got misdiagnosed with a precancerous condition, and then come to find out I didn't have that condition, but I was still sick. And when I got in wrestling, I was like, I don't know how long I might be able to do this. And so I really didn't have like the greatest of gear at first. And so finally, when I went all in, I was like, I'm going to get like real gear, and it's going to look fantastic. I'm going to get boots. I got an entrance jacket. I got all this stuff together. And it was my first event. I was out at this small company up in Northwest Pennsylvania called Madmar, and was like, I'm on my best game ever. And I run out there and I slide. I do like the Titus O'Neil round, like, but instead of like going under the ring, I'm like running with babyface fire on the outside of the ring, and I round the corner and I just slide into the aisleway in the crowd. And I'm just like sitting there like, well, dang it. It's like, this was awesome. I just get up and like, hey, everybody. It was such a goofy, and I'm like, no, not great.
And I had a question about some recent news that happened within recent weeks.
Okay.
There was an announcement recently by WWE that they would be allowing NXT wrestlers to wrestle in select independent companies. I just wonder what you think about the impact of that.
Well, I kind of want to see fully what that means, because it made it also sound like only select members of the NXT roster. So does that mean, like, could Braun Breaker be able to come out? Could Joe Gacy return? Like, or are they going to keep like sort of the topper? That's a grammatically wrong word. Will the upper tier echelon of the NXT roster not travel? And where does that break happen? And so who would it be that would then be able to travel? So I'm kind of waiting to see how that falls out, because they haven't been very clear yet who they're going to let out. So once they make that decision and once that's announced, I'm all in. Like, I think that'll be cool, because you're seeing that with the majority of the Impact roster. You're seeing that with the majority of the AEW roster. And so, like, it just adds to more of that diversity inside of the world of wrestling. And inside of the world of wrestling, like, the way fandoms are built over time is really interesting. And right now, and this is just wholly my perspective, of course, kids are going to find their way to an AEW, to a WWE, to an Impact, to an MLW. But those shows aren't really oriented to grab kids per se. They're really sort of oriented more towards a younger adult crowd. And so there isn't like that way that a middle school kid, as I was when I really got into wrestling, could sort of like latch onto easily, per se. I grew up in the era where there was wrestling on at noon on Saturdays. And that was sort of my door in to be able to watch as a kid. And then, okay, as I was a teenager, it was like, oh, I have Monday Night Raw I can watch. But it started with me as a kid having that interest and watching it on Saturdays, to then watch it in the evenings when you're old enough to now watch television that late. And so me, it's like, I feel like we're missing a little bit of that generation of younger kids getting interested and into it from the mainstream programming. So then that puts a lot of that reliance on independent wrestling and those that have like the family followings. Like I think of an MCW Pro Wrestling, it really is strong about the connections that they build with their community and their families. Honorary Wrestling Federation up in Pennsylvania, Future Great Wrestling out in Ohio, OVW even in Kentucky. Like the way they reach out to the family and get them involved. And so then you're starting to build this base of fans through independent wrestling. And on top of that, and this is something weird that I learned a while ago that the WWE figured out, the best talkers of the wrestling community is the wrestling community. And so, and sort of the random way I figured this out, and this will come back to it in a sense, it'll come back in a second and make sense. When WWE did that last season of Tough Enough, and they were trying to recruit people into it. And so, hey, everybody, we want you to apply. And they were getting people to apply. And then they were shooting messages out like, put your stuff out there and like get out the word that you're going to apply and like get people to hype you up. And so people were getting these letters from the WWE saying, hype up your content and put your content out there and like let everybody see your stuff. They had already selected their cast. Like I knew people on that cast, and it's like, well, why are they telling people to like hype it up if they've already signed everybody? And it was like, oh, this is a complete marketing mechanism because they know the wrestling community will talk up the wrestling community. And so independent wrestling will talk highly of that community. And look at how active on social media the attention is across the scope of wrestling. We'll Wrestler A that works for this smaller company in Pennsylvania that you've probably not really heard of singularly change the scope and landscape of professional wrestling as he or she is today? Probably not. But if that person is engaged with somebody else who has a bigger following, with somebody else who has a bigger following, with somebody else who has a bigger following, and all of them start talking about it and generating that buzz, that's going to get more attention. And, at Wrestling Revolver was very fortunate that we had, Speedball Mike Bailey is one of the best wrestlers in the world. He's one of the best wrestlers on Impact Television, which is an international televised wrestling product. And Wrestling Revolver had him to face Kenta. And that got so much buzz and attention out in the wrestling world. And Impact could have been like, no, we don't want Speedball to wrestle anywhere else except for us. They could have done that, but they didn't. And they've been very open to their talent out there. And that has also then helped their talent because where else can you go see Speedball Mike Bailey? Oh, every Thursday on Impact Wrestling. And so I think this is a great marketing mechanism for their talent as well.
I would agree with that because I would have never seen Speedball except at MCW a few months ago. So
right.
And getting back to the family thing you had to say, I agree with you on that because I grew up watching wrestling at 12 noon like you did. Now, my daughter tries to... You see my daughter with me at shows, and she kind of tried to watch WWE and mainstream wrestling, and she got into it for a little while, and then she just lost interest in it. But now she's interested in going to any indie show that we can go to.
And that's awesome. Like, and like I sort of said earlier, like I got in because I was hooked by the story, and other people, and then the where the hook was the story, I stayed there because of the amazing technical wrestling that I was watching, and that really just sunk its teeth even deeper into my psyche. And so, like, I think you get a good exposure to both of that in independent wrestling. I'm not saying I won't say on top of televised wrestling, because when you have a weekly product and sometimes multiple times in a week that you can watch a product, you're going to get more of the story than you are going to get with a company that might run once a month or once every other month and be able to envelop that a little bit easier. But you might get more of an athletic contest. I mean, WWE athletes are like Olympic caliber athletes in the way they train and work out and the way they're ready for television. But you're seeing some amazing things that you aren't going to see on television on the independent wrestling scene. Yes, there's envelopes that are pushed on television, but these are people who are trying to earn that opportunity to push envelopes on television. So they're pushing envelopes right now in independent wrestling, and that needs to be seen more.
What moment in your wrestling career are you the proudest of?
Ooh, that's deep. That's a deep cut. It's weird how the landscape has changed regarding doing promos. for example, because in my wrestling life, it used to, I mean, if you think about just how we have such more easily accessible technology to us right now, that, cell phones really didn't have good cameras until maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago-ish, I guess now. And so, there really wasn't that accessibility to like just turn your phone on yourself and cut a promo. And so I knew in like 2005-ish, I think, I had my own camcorder so I could record promos. But that was then only sometimes when you could convince a promoter to let you do one. So at one point I was just creating content to just create content. And about probably 12 years ago or so, I started with this company in North Carolina, and I reached out to the promoter and I was like, do you mind if I cut a promo? And of course, like, I'll let you approve it and everything. They're like, oh yeah, sure, go for it. But it was like such an aside. Like, it wasn't like, we want you to. It was like, yeah, if you want to, go ahead. And I cut it, and it made me sort of open up this new door for myself in wrestling, because I really didn't have a lot of anybody driving, hey, do promos. We want you to do promos. And so it really allowed me to truly find my voice. And that was my first real exposure. So I was sort of really proud of, in a way, of myself, because I found, this is how you talk in wrestling, and this is how people get to see more of you, and how people like really pay attention to what's happening right now. And I'm happy with myself on a few of the promos that I've put together and developed. And I've put my hand in on some like cinematic wrestling stuff, especially during the pandemic, and more vignettes and story stuff. And I'm really happy that I got involved with some of those things. Even recently, like right before Christmas, I worked with Matt Mikowski, and we put together a Die Hard Christmas trios. So like so it was sort of this skit that was put together between a wrestling event. And I helped to put that together. And I don't know, it allowed this other avenue of creativity. And I was really happy and proud to be able to do that. But at the same time, I look at a company like Wrestling Revolver that I helped to build. And I look at the success that we're seeing now, and I'm like, this is what I love about wrestling, because now we've taken the opportunity to actually build a thing, and look at us building this thing. And isn't it cool? And isn't going to be cool when more people see it and get exposed to it, and we get to continue to build into whatever the next thing will be for it. And I always love that, and I'm really excited. I'm sort of excited then for what the next thing is going to be.
Could you talk about a day in the life behind the scenes in one of your authority roles, whether it include, just pick a company, for example, and maybe throw in what your travel is like and what you actually do when you get there behind the scenes backstage?
I'm like, how much of a curtain do I pull? It does vary a little bit by company, because, when you have different sets of owners or singular owner, it's sort of up to their own company and how they want to run things. Think about like when you've had different jobs, and like one thing you might do at one place is very different when you do it at the next place. And so it is, first learning that landscape. Typically, behind the scenes, there is some kind of meeting to talk about the matches that are going to be happening that evening. There's some kind of meeting to talk about the production of things. How are we going to make things look or be? There is typically, at any event I'm on, a lot of running to get things together. If you look at most companies, we're very fortunate, like at MCW Pro Wrestling, where we have our own venue. But even then, like that venue during the week is set up for training, and there's typically 2 or 3 rings set up. And so when it gets transferred into an event space for a night of wrestling on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday, well, we're taking down 2 rings. We're now setting up chairs. We're setting up aisleways. We're setting up tables for autographs and merchandise, and we have to change that landscape. But imagine then having to do that every single time you have an event at a venue that isn't yours. And so you are running and gunning and going and setting up. So there isn't sometimes a long time to do these meetings like production and let's talk about booking and let's talk about these things. That's all happening even before we've gotten to the event sometimes. And so now it's like, okay, we just got to do this. We just got to go. We just got to get ready. We just got to do the thing. And at the same time, for me, who's also then involved in front of the camera, what am I doing? And trying to figure that out as well. So as much as I'm part of that decision-making process, I'm also having to then figure out how I'm doing, what I'm going to look like, all that kind of stuff, and how I'm going to show up and present to everybody too. And there's a lot of catching up. The people that you work with, again, think of any workplace that you're in. There's people that you like. There's people that you don't like. There's people you want to go over to and say hi and good morning and how are you and what's going on. Then there's people that you want to like go around the other way. And so like it's very much like that in the world of wrestling too. It's like, okay, like let's associate, let's hang out. Like, hey, what's going on? How's this? We talked about this last time. I haven't seen you in a month or 2 months. What's going on here now? And it's a little bit of that catch up too on a personal side too. And so there's a lot of like moving parts that happen behind an event to make sure just everything is done. Oh yeah, on top of all of that, making sure, are we making money? Are we doing the right things that give us a good proposition to be stood up in front of fans for fans to want to really sink their teeth into this event we're giving them, and to then also giving them a reason to come back the next time, and the next time after that, and to think forward a few events to like, how are we going to get there and be good at how we're doing it? It takes a really, really strong intention to do that. So again, it's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of moving parts to really just get things done. But for the people who are behind the scenes in the world of professional wrestling, like their night doesn't end after just one match. And that is definitely not taking away anything from any talent that's in the ring. But, the camera guys aren't getting a break. Like some of your events have one referee. Look at who's doing security, if there is any. Look at who's manning the merch tables. Look at who's just running things behind the scenes. Look at who's cutting your promos. And getting wrestlers together to try to cut promos sometimes is like herding live cats. And so it takes a lot of effort, and they're doing that the entire night. And so people don't sometimes see that there is this other work that's getting done at the same time.
Hit a few personal questions right now. What's your favorite food?
Okay, it has to be pizza. Like, it just has to be. Whenever I've gotten a new job, whenever I've moved someplace, I'm like, I have to find the pizza place. I have to try it. How is it going to be? I will go out of my way to find a new pizza place. And I'm like, I don't even think that is my favorite food, but that is my favorite go-to food. I'm trying to think my favorite food. My favorite food is honestly probably chicken and dumplings.
That's a good one. Okay, what is your favorite drink?
Ooh, that's a good one. Pib Extra. Used to be Mr. Pibb. Now it's, they've now changed their name. They're Pib Extra. I'm a huge mark for that. It kills my stomach every time because of my stomach issue that I have. I shouldn't really be having soda, but man, that's good.
Okay, and your favorite band or musician?
Ooh, I am really bad with that, to be honest. I'm that person, like, I turn on the radio, and if it's music I find that has a good beat, I just listen. And of course I know, like, bigger artists, but, like, I couldn't tell you sometimes, like, what they've sung, unless they're, like, super iconic. And so, like, I really don't think I have a favorite artist, but I'll rotate genres of music all the time. I'll listen to rap and rock and pop and country and top 40, and I'll just keep rotating. I even think like there's a couple interesting like hard rock and alt X channels that are out there that like might even have just a super small radius that they air on, and I'm like, I love it. Every time I get a chance to turn to it, I turn to it.
And what is your favorite vacation spot?
Orlando, Florida. I am such a mark for Universal Orlando. I love it, and specifically for Halloween Horror Nights. They do such an amazing job because they're not just replicating like, they're not just making a haunted house. They have the rights to use like Chucky and make a Chucky themed haunted house. Like my favorite one that they've ever did, they did a Freddy versus Jason haunted house. And that was just amazing. And so like they do really amazing things at Universal. And so I really, really enjoy going, like when I know like, okay, I just need to take that vacation. I just need to go somewhere where like there's nobody else with me. I'm going to Universal Studios. And of course that's the side of like when I go visit family and stuff. And I have a lot of family out in the Midwest, like in Indiana, for example, that I love to go see. And I love to go out there, and I don't get enough chances to go do that. But beyond that, yeah, Orlando, Universal.
Okay, and then one more personal question. What was the last book you read?
Oh, what did I read last? I feel like I've been reading like snippets of books lately. I feel bad because I have a coworker, and now I have a coworker who wrote a book, and I haven't read the book. I haven't finished reading the book. I've only read like a couple chapters. It's called The City of Good Death. and it's so enriching and so detailed, and it's just an amazing book, but I haven't finished it yet. Before that, I read the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is like the prequel to the Hunger Games, and that was pretty good. And I even think that book was a little better than the Hunger Games series, to be honest.
Now we'll give you a chance to promote any upcoming wrestling shows that you're a part of.
So I'm gonna cheat because I have to write them down because I forget things. Like if I don't look at it, I know I will forget one. So I'm like, what month are we at? So on the 25th of February, we have MCW in Perrysville, Maryland. On March 4th, it's Wrestling Revolver in Clive, Iowa. On March 11th, it's MCW in Joppa, Maryland. On March 12th, it's Honorary Wrestling Federation up in Lewistown, Pennsylvania. March 18th, it's High Tension Wrestling in Pennsylvania. And so like the next month for me is like go, go, go. So for starting next week, for like a month straight, I have at least one event every weekend. Like last night I was at Voltage Wrestling up in Pennsylvania. I'm not able to make their event next month on March 16th, which is a Thursday night. But the rest of this weekend I'm off, which I'm already stir crazy. I don't know what to do with myself. And so starting next weekend, though, that changes, and my weekends are gone again, which is awesome.
Run down all of your personal social media handles and any other place online you are that you want to let people know about.
Well, I make it really easy. All of my social media is at Trust in Phil. So if you look at me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Snapchat, I think I said Instagram, on Hive even, you can find me at Trust in Phil, even though I haven't updated my Hive since that seemed to have died off pretty quick.
Back to business a little bit. Who are the top up-and-coming wrestlers across all of the companies you're working with now that you see as having a bright future?
Ooh, that's a really good one. And you're probably going to get me in trouble for some of them. Interestingly enough, I work a lot of places where there's not a lot of crossover right now. So like at MCW, you have such a deep talent pool, and we have a great wrestling school with MCW. So like I look at a Miami Mike Walker and am like, he's gonna do something. I can look at like a Steven Fuerte and be like, okay, he's building to something. He's not there yet. And that's more of like what I look for. I always look for the people who have like, how much more potential do you have to give? And you also at MCW have the guys like a Joe Keys and a Dante Caballero who have been there, who have had that opportunity to do the ROH dojo. And now like, okay, people know them and they've networked well. So are they next also to be looked at by more people? So that is such an interesting pool of talent that is out of MCW. I look at Revolver, and so many of it's hard with Revolver to say like who would I pick because so much of that roster is already signed with either Impact or AEW. And so if I pull out like, okay, the not signed folks, so that way I won't get myself in that much trouble, I look at a JT Dunn. JT Dunn to me is literally the best unsigned talent in the world today. Like there's just no rhyme or reason in my brain for why he is not signed somewhere. I look at a guy like a Damian Chambers, who his name isn't known yet by a lot of people, other than the people at Revolver who want to throttle him. And I think he's only going to continue to build. He has $1 million look. He needs time to percolate, and he's going to be that guy. And he has the backing of Sami Callihan and the training of Sami Callihan. And so he's going to become also that dangerous as he continues to develop more and more and more. I was going to say Ninja Mac, but Ninja Mac's actually signed now with Noah. And every time I see Ninja Mac, he's gotten better. And that's scary. Like if you already see, and if you've ever had the opportunity to see Ninja Mac, like just how intense he can be, the level of his aerial offense, but he just keeps getting better and better and better. And one of the last people I used to say, like every time I see that person, they get better, was Trey Miguel. And now look at Trey Miguel, who is currently the X Division champion at Impact. And Trey, when I first saw him at Rockstar Pro Wrestling in Dayton, Ohio, I was like, oh yeah, he's good. And then I saw him a few months later, I'm like, oh wow, he's gotten better. And then I saw him a few months later, oh wow, he's gotten better. And even to this day, every time I see Trey Miguel, he's gotten better. Ace Austin is another one of those guys too. But again, he's also signed with Impact and goes to New Japan. And he's, now one of the Bullet Club. So it's hard for me to be like, look at this guy who's up and coming, because he's there. He's there and doing it right now, which is just awesome. I like there's so much great talent out there. Like right now, like another national company could open up and run. I don't even know what night is open anymore. I don't know. They'll have a 10 p.m. program after NXT, and there would be enough good talent to be on there too. And that could be a Jay Fowler from Iowa. That could be the Carver of Cutter's Alley. That could be a Sage Phillips from Indiana. There is just such a deep pool of additional talent that's out there that, like, I really, really, really want to see get more of that exposure and more of those looks. The main event is a tag team from Pittsburgh that, like, I am trying so hard for people to that I work with to, like, look at these guys, because it's not going to be long before you see them on television regularly. And so, like, I want them to get more exposure, and specifically the main event tag team that's out of Pittsburgh, because there's like 5 main event tag teams. Those guys. Yeah, there's just a lot of great talent that's really out there and circulating and percolating. Gia Scott at MCW is another one who I think is going to be coming up very, very quick and very, very soon. Billy Starks just turned 18, is on her way to her second tour of Japan at just turning 18. She doesn't graduate high school for a couple more months. She is going to be signed. There is not a doubt in my mind on that anymore, because she's already put in the work. And I hear people who, like, vent, like, oh, this 18-year-old girl. It's like, yeah, because she's good, because she's gone through it already for the last 3-4 years of driving roads and putting in the work. She didn't just come out at the age of 18 and be like, look at me, I'm a wrestler. She's been wrestling for years already. And she has just gained that much capability.
And I think there's a deep talent pool and a really strong independent wrestling scene just in this region, in the DMV region, to get back to my website.
And I mean, I mentioned Killian McMurphy and the Goons, and, like, can you think of anybody more controversial than Killian McMurphy in this area? I mean, he's somebody that makes a lot of people, you either love Killian McMurphy or you just want to, like, choke him, like, just barehandedly, like, kill him. That's the reaction he gives you, and it's amazing.
Thanks to Phil Stamper for being a great guest today on Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire. Please join us next time for another great guest on this podcast. Our credits are: executive producer is Scott English. You too can become an executive producer with your donation. Please see our website for more details. Our production assistant is Josie Quinton. The host is me, Jeff Quinton. We'll have another great episode very soon. Thanks for joining us.